What would you do if you found a door in your own home that shouldn't exist? Would you open it? Or would you obey the voice that warns you never to try? That was the question that haunted me the first night I moved into the new apartment. The place was small but perfect for me. Cheap rent, decent location, and a view of the city that made the nights glow like a blanket of stars. The landlord, Mr. Givens, was an odd man in his late 60s. He had pale, paper-thin skin and watery eyes that always seemed to be looking a few inches behind you, as though he could see things you couldn't. When I first toured the apartment, I noticed something strange at the end of the narrow hallway. It was a plain black door, painted so dark it seemed to swallow the light around it. No handle, no keyhole, just a flat, smooth surface that looked completely out of place with the rest of the apartment's faded white walls and chipped doors. "What's behind that one?" I had asked casually, pointing at it. For the first time, Mr. Givens looked me directly in the eye. His pale lips tightened into something that was not quite a smile. "That's not for you," he said. "The black door stays closed. Always." I laughed nervously. "So, like a maintenance closet or something?" His expression didn't change. "You'll do fine here as long as you don't try to open it." The way he said it sent a small chill up my spine, but I shrugged it off. Every old apartment had its quirks. The first night, I unpacked my boxes, ordered pizza, and tried to relax. But as midnight rolled around, I kept finding my eyes drifting toward the hallway, toward that door. It wasn't just black, it was too black. No reflection, no texture, just a void, like a shadow that had been carved into the wall. I turned off the lights and went to bed. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. Not from a dream, not from noise, just awake. My throat was dry, so I got up to get water from the kitchen. As I passed the hallway, I froze. There was sound, a faint scratching, slow, deliberate, like fingernails tracing the inside of the door. I stood there in the dark, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. Old buildings made noises, didn't they? Pipes groaning, wood settling. But then, clear as day, I heard it. 3 knocks. Knock. 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 From the inside. I backed away and shut myself in my room, clutching the glass of water like a weapon. By morning, I told myself it had been a dream. Sleep deprivation, first night jitters. Anything but real. A few days later, I ran into one of the neighbors, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a grocery bag slung over her arm. She introduced herself as Dana. "You're in 3B, right?" she asked. "Yeah, just moved in." Her face tightened ever so slightly. "That one." "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated, then shook her head. "Nothing. Just, if you hear anything strange at night, don't investigate. Trust me." I tried to laugh it off, but her tone was dead serious. That night, as I lay in bed, I listened for it. At first, silence. Then, around 1:45 a.m., the scratching started again. This time, it was different. It wasn't nails, it was whispering. So faint I could barely make it out, like a voice pressed against the other side of the wood. The cadence was strange, broken, but there was no mistaking it. Someone was speaking. I inched closer down the hallway, against every instinct screaming at me to turn back. "Hello?" I whispered before I could stop myself. The whispering stopped. Silence. Then a voice answered. It was my own. "Don't open the door." I stumbled back, my skin crawling. The voice was identical to mine. Not similar, not close. Perfect. Like a recording of my own voice, warning me. The next morning, the black door looked as plain and lifeless as ever. No sign of sound, no scratches, nothing. But I knew what I'd heard. And that night, as the clock struck 2, I sat awake, staring at the hallway, waiting to hear my own voice again. What I heard instead chilled me even deeper. A knock, knock, knock. Then a new voice, rough and urgent, forcing its way through the wood. "Let me out." I barely slept after that voice. It kept replaying in my head over and over, as if the door itself had pressed the words into my skull. Let me out. The sound wasn't like the whispers the night before. This wasn't faint or ghostly or like something in my imagination. It had weight, urgency. It was as real as a person standing right behind me, pressing their mouth to my ear. By morning, I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. I forced down coffee, opened my laptop for work, went through emails, but nothing stuck. My thoughts kept circling back to the black door, to the scratching, to the way it had stolen my own voice before giving me someone else's. Who was in there? Was there anyone in there at all? I knew the smart thing would have been to ignore it, to pack up and leave, to find another apartment before the month's lease trapped me here. But cheap rent is a heavy chain when you don't have much money. And the truth is, part of me was curious. That night, I stayed up late, pacing my small living room. I told myself I wouldn't walk down that hallway, that I wouldn't even look at the black door. But as the digital clock on my nightstand blinked to 1:37 a.m., the apartment seemed to shift around me. The hum of the refrigerator grew too loud. The pipes in the walls throbbed like veins. And then, almost predictably, it began again. The scratching. Slow, deliberate, like nails carving a message I couldn't read. I tried to turn up the TV to drown it out, but the sound cut through everything, crawling under the noise, slithering directly into my ears. My breath caught when the whispering began. The same rhythm, the same broken cadence as before. I stood frozen in the doorway of the living room, staring down that long, shadow-filled hall. The whispering grew sharper, more insistent. At first it sounded like many voices speaking at once, then like one voice moving too quickly, sliding over words I couldn't understand. And then, clear as glass, it shifted again into my voice. Don't open the door. Hearing it once had been terrifying. Hearing it again was unbearable. It felt like someone had recorded me without my knowledge, like I had spoken into a void and it had come back to haunt me. But what unsettled me most wasn't just that the voice was mine. It was that this time, I hadn't said anything at all. And then, just as my breath began to steady, it came. 3 hard knocks. Knock, knock, knock. And a voice, not mine, snarled out with jagged desperation. Let me out. The force of the words was enough to send me stumbling back into the living room. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands, dialing Dana's number, the neighbor I'd met in the hall. She had scribbled it down for me a few days earlier, saying, "In case you ever need anything." At the time, I'd thought it was just neighborly kindness. Now I wasn't so sure. When she picked up, her voice was groggy but sharp. "It's after 1 in the morning. What do you want?" Dana... My throat closed around the words. "It's the door. The black door. There's something inside. Someone." Silence. Then a low sigh. "You heard it." My stomach twisted. "So it's real? You know what it is?" There was a long pause. "Listen to me carefully. Do not, under any circumstances, answer it. No matter what it says, no matter what you hear, you don't touch that door. Do you understand?" I clutched the phone tighter. "What's in there?" Another pause. Then, "Not what. Who?" The line went dead. The next morning, I confronted Mr. Givens, the landlord. I found him outside the building, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. His pale eyes looked worse in daylight, reddened, ringed with sleeplessness. "You didn't tell me there was someone locked in there," I said, my voice louder than I meant it to be. I heard them. They begged to be let out. He didn't flinch. He just took a long drag and exhaled slowly. "You'll last here only if you listen. You don't open it. Ever. Doesn't matter what you hear." "Who is it?" I demanded. "Why is there a locked room in my apartment?" He flicked his cigarette to the ground, grinding it under his shoe. For the first time since I'd met him, his voice wavered. "That door's been there longer than I have. Longer than this building, maybe. Tenants hear things. They think it's someone trapped. It isn't. Don't make the same mistake." His words chilled me more than the voice had. He wasn't warning me like a man with something to hide. He was warning me like a man who'd seen others fail. That night, I tried everything to avoid the hallway. Headphones, loud music, whiskey. But nothing dulled the anticipation. Midnight passed, then 1, then 1:30. My eyelids grew heavy, and for the first time since I'd moved in, I thought maybe the night would stay quiet. But at 1:46 a.m., my phone buzzed violently on the nightstand. An unknown number. Against all sense, I answered. Static hissed through the line. Then, beneath it, came a whisper. My voice. "Open the door." My blood ran cold, and then, layered beneath it, almost too faint to hear, came Dana's voice. "Please, don't listen to it." I dropped the phone as the black door shook violently against its frame. The door rattled so violently that I thought the hinges might snap. My whole apartment seemed to shake with it, the old wooden floor creaking under my bare feet. I backed away into the bedroom, clutching the dropped phone, but the screen had gone black. No static. No Dana. Just the sound of the door straining against itself like something inside was throwing its entire weight at it, desperate to burst free. I pressed my back to the wall and tried to breathe. I wanted to tell myself it was a dream, or a nightmare brought on by sleeplessness and paranoia, but the vibrations in the air told me otherwise. The rattling went on for what felt like hours, but must have been only minutes. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence fell so heavy it rang in my ears. I didn't move for the rest of the night. At dawn, when the light finally bled into the room, I ventured down the hallway. The black door stood perfectly still, perfectly normal, as though nothing had happened. But I noticed something that hadn't been there before. Thin, splintered cracks forming along the edges of the frame, as if the wood itself had been slowly pried open from within. That morning, I waited until I heard footsteps in the hallway. When I cracked the door, Dana was walking by, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. I stepped out quickly and grabbed her arm before I could lose my nerve. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Don't tell me to just ignore it. I need to know." She froze, staring at me like she was deciding whether to lie. Finally, she sighed. "Come to my place. We can't talk about it in there." Her apartment was directly below mine. It was cluttered, small, but warm in a way mine never was. She set a kettle on the stove and leaned against the counter with her arms folded. "You said you heard it." "The voice," she said quietly. "I've heard more than one voice," I admitted. "Sometimes mine, sometimes someone else's." Her mouth tightened. "That's how it starts. It always begins with familiar voices, ones you trust. But it changes. It uses whatever it can to get you close enough, to make you curious, to make you want to open it." Her words made my stomach sink. "So what happens if someone opens it?" Dana hesitated. The kettle whistled, but she didn't move to turn it off. Her eyes flicked to the window, as though she was afraid of being overheard. "There was a tenant before you. A young guy. Moved in, lasted about 2 months. He told me about the scratching, the voices. I told him the same thing I'm telling you now. Don't go near it. But one night..." Her voice faltered. She finally turned, shut the kettle off, and poured water into 2 chipped mugs. "One night I heard screaming. Not his voice. Not even human. When I ran upstairs, his apartment was locked from the inside. The police came. They broke in." She set the mug down in front of me, her hands trembling. "He was gone. The room was empty except for that door. They said he must have skipped town, but I know better. He didn't leave. He went through." Her words hit me like a hammer. "Through? Through where?" Her eyes locked on mine, haunted. "That's the problem. No one knows. They never come back." I sat in silence, the tea cooling between my hands, my mind unraveling. Every rational part of me wanted to deny it. But I'd heard the voices. I'd felt the floor shake. Something was inside that door, and someone had let it out before. Why hasn't the landlord done anything? I asked finally. Dana gave a humorless laugh. Mr. Givens has been here longer than anyone. He knows the truth. He's just trying to survive. The way he sees it, as long as the door stays shut, the rest of us are safe. But he won't tell you everything. He can't. He's afraid talking about it too much will draw its attention. I wanted to ask more, but her expression warned me not to. Instead, I left with her words lodged in my brain like a splinter. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I sat on the couch, staring at the hallway. The silence in the apartment pressed against me like a weight. My eyes kept darting to the clock. 1:15, 1:30, 1:45, and right on cue, the scratching began. But this time, it wasn't faint. It was loud, sharp, angry, like claws raking at the wood. My body stiffened as I heard it. The voice. "Please," it whispered. "Please, let me out." I pressed my hands to my ears, rocking back and forth, whispering no, no, no. But the voice grew louder, splitting into many voices, echoing, pleading, commanding. And then, in the middle of it all, one voice rang out clear. Dana's. "Help me!" it screamed. "Please, open the door!" My blood froze. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number with shaking fingers. When she answered, her voice was calm, tired, very much alive. "Hello?" I nearly dropped the phone. "Dana, it's using your voice. It's using you." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "That's what it does. Don't believe anything it says. Don't you dare." I hung up and sat in the dark, trembling, while the voices at the black door grew louder and louder. Until, just before dawn, they fell silent all at once. When I finally found the courage to check the hallway, my heart nearly stopped. The black door was open, not wide, just a sliver, just enough to see that the inside wasn't darkness, but something worse. Behind that door wasn't a closet or a room. It was moving. A shifting, writhing blackness like smoke trapped in water. Shapes twisting, hands reaching, faces forming and vanishing in a blink. And for a fraction of a second, I swear I saw him, the missing tenant. His face pale, his eyes hollow, pressed against the threshold, mouthing silent words. Then the door slammed shut with a force that shook the whole apartment. And I knew, with a certainty that made me sick, it wasn't going to stay closed much longer. The slam of the black door echoed in my bones long after the sound had faded. I stood frozen in the hallway, heart pounding so violently it hurt, staring at that impossible door as though it might spring open again at any second. My mind replayed the glimpse I'd caught, the writhing liquid blackness behind it, the face pressed against the threshold, the silent, desperate mouth. I could still see the hollowness of his eyes, the emptiness that wasn't just death, but something worse. I stumbled backward, retreating into the bedroom, and locked the door behind me, even though I knew a simple lock wouldn't save me. I sat there until daylight streamed through the blinds, gripping the edge of the mattress with white knuckles, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. By morning, the apartment looked ordinary again, as though the night hadn't torn a hole in reality. That morning, I decided I couldn't ignore this anymore. If Dana wouldn't tell me the full truth, and if Mr. Givens only spoke in riddles, then I had to force answers out of someone. I marched downstairs to the ground floor where the landlord lived. His door was half open and the smell of stale tobacco and old coffee leaked out. "Mr. Givens," I called, knocking. The old man appeared in the doorway, his eyes bloodshot, his skin pale and drawn. For the first time, he looked smaller, weaker, like a man whittled down by decades of carrying a secret too heavy to bear. "It's opening," I said, my voice trembling. "Last night, it cracked open on its own. I saw what was inside. I saw him. You knew this would happen." His lips trembled around the unlit cigarette in his mouth. "You should have left when I told you." "That's not good enough," my voice cracked. "I need to know what's in there, why it's in my apartment, and what happened to the last tenant. If you don't tell me, I'll... He cut me off with a laugh that was more like a wheeze. What will you do? Call the cops? Tell them what? That a black door talks to you in the night? That something's scratching at the walls? They'll throw you in a hospital bed and lock you up tighter than that door ever will. Then tell me, I demanded. Tell me the truth. He leaned against the frame, finally lighting the cigarette. Smoke coiled around his head like a phantom. Truth is, that door's older than this building. Older than me. Older than anyone left alive who remembers. This place was built in the 40s. But the black door, it was already here. They say the builders tried to tear it down, tore up the wall, stripped it to the studs. But when they came back the next day, there it was again. Same spot, same black paint, smooth as if it had never been touched. My skin prickled. So what's behind it? He shook his head slowly. No one knows. But we know what happens when it opens. People disappear. Sometimes they're dragged through. Sometimes they walk in willingly, thinking they're helping someone. Either way, they don't come back. That tenant you asked about? He wasn't the first. He won't be the last. The thing inside, it knows how to talk, how to trick. It knows the voice that'll make you move. I felt sick. Why leave it there? Why let people rent the apartment at all? His face hardened, the softness evaporating. Because it doesn't like to be left alone. Empty apartments, it gets restless. And when it gets restless, the whole building suffers. Better one tenant at a time than all of us. The implication hit me like ice water. He was sacrificing us, feeding tenants to whatever hid behind that door so the rest of the building could survive. You bastard, I whispered. He didn't flinch. You think I don't hate myself? But there's no stopping it. I've tried. We've all tried. And if you're smart, you'll do what the rest of us do. Stay away. Don't listen. Don't answer. Survive. He shut the door in my face, leaving me shaking with rage and dread. That night, I couldn't stay in the apartment. I packed a bag and went to a cheap motel on the other side of town. I told myself I'd sleep there, maybe never return. But at 1:46 a.m., I woke up in the motel room to the sound of scratching. Not on the door, on the wall above the bed. My heart lurched as I sat up. The plaster trembled with every scrape, like nails were clawing from the other side. And then, faint but unmistakable, my phone buzzed. An unknown number again. Against every ounce of reason, I answered. Static filled my ear. Then, faintly, the voice. Please, it's so dark in here. I dropped the phone on the bed, my pulse roaring. No matter where I went, the thing was with me. The door wasn't just a place. It was a presence. And it wasn't bound to the apartment anymore. I drove back before dawn, exhausted, desperate, hoping that being near the door again would at least keep it contained. When I entered the hallway, I froze. The black door was wide open. This time there was no sliver, no crack. It yawned fully into the hallway, revealing the shifting void beyond. The air that poured out was cold and damp, reeking of earth and iron. I saw the faces again, dozens, maybe hundreds, pressing against the writhing darkness, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. And then, at the very edge, one figure stepped forward. It was Dana. Her skin was pale, her hair floating as though underwater, her eyes wide with terror. She reached her hand toward me, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear. And then her voice came, clear as day, from everywhere at once. Please, help me. Don't let it take me. Pull me out. I staggered back, shaking my head. I had just spoken to her yesterday. I had heard her voice on the phone. She was alive, wasn't she? But as I hesitated, torn between reason and panic, the figure in the door pressed closer, her arm reaching through the threshold. The skin of her hand was cold, damp, clammy as it brushed my fingers. And then she screamed. A scream so loud it felt like the walls would collapse. The door slammed shut again, nearly crushing her hand, and I stumbled backward into the darkness of my apartment, heart pounding, ears ringing. When the silence returned, I realized something that chilled me deeper than anything so far. On the floor by my feet lay something impossible. A single damp handprint. The sound came again that night, dragging me from a restless, shallow sleep, scratching. But this time, it wasn't faint. It wasn't muffled. It was louder, closer. I froze in bed, every nerve in my body pulling tight like strings about to snap. For the first time since moving in, I thought I heard something with the scratching. A voice, or no, not quite a voice, but a cadence, like a whisper forming shapes in the dark. I sat upright, heart punching at my ribs, staring at the crack under my bedroom door. The hallway beyond was pitch black, but I didn't need to see it to know where the sound was coming from. The black door. Always the black door. I told myself not to move, to stay under the covers, to wait until morning. But the scratching grew erratic, desperate, and the whispering, if that's what it was, rose to a low, guttural muttering. It was like something was pleading, and that's when I noticed something new. The air smelled wrong. Not just old dust or mildew, but acrid, sour, like meat gone bad left in the summer heat. My throat tightened and my stomach lurched. The smell wasn't in the kitchen. It wasn't drifting in from outside. It was seeping under my bedroom door. I held my breath, slid out of bed and crept across the floor. My legs trembled as I pressed my ear against the wood. The hallway was silent, but I swear the surface of the door was cold. So cold it felt damp against my skin. I shouldn't have opened it. God, I knew I shouldn't. But curiosity, or maybe something stronger, something pulling at me, made me twist the knob. The hallway was exactly as it should have been. Long, narrow, dim, that impossible door waiting at the far end. But the smell hit me harder, thicker. My stomach heaved, and I slapped a hand over my mouth. And that's when I saw it. The black door was open. Not wide, not fully, but enough. A hand could have slipped through. Or maybe a face. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. No, it wasn't open before. I remember checking it earlier, seeing the chipped paint, the chain latch hanging loose. I remembered. But now a thin line of darker black split its center. I took one step forward, then another. The smell grew stronger with each inch. My bare feet stuck to the floor as though something slick had been spilled there. The scratching had stopped, the whispering too. But silence was worse. Silence meant waiting. I don't know what possessed me to get so close, but I found myself standing directly in front of it. My breath fogged in the cold that leaked through the narrow slit. I reached out, trembling, and laid my fingers on the wood. It pulsed. I yanked my hand back so fast my nails scraped the paint. I wanted to scream, but my throat closed up. My heart rammed against my chest so violently I thought it might break free. And then, something moved on the other side. Not scratching, not whispering, breathing. Long, rattling breaths, in and out, right there, inches from my face with only a thin panel of wood separating us. I stumbled back, tripped over my own foot and hit the wall. The breath quickened, urgent, frantic, as though whatever was inside knew it had frightened me, and it liked it. And then, the voice came. A whisper, clear this time, slicing through the thick silence. Closer. My vision swam. Every instinct in me screamed to run back to my room, lock the door, call someone, anyone. But my body wouldn't listen. My knees shook, my hands twitched, but I kept staring at that small gap. Something shifted inside. Not the outline of a hand, not a shadow of a face, but an eye. A wet, gleaming eye peering through the crack, unblinking, bloodshot, impossibly wide. I froze. It saw me. And in that awful moment, in the dead silence of the hallway, I realized something else. The chain latch, the one that was supposed to hold it shut, was gone. Not broken, not dangling, gone. The door creaked wider, inch by inch, and the last thing I heard before I bolted back to my bedroom was the whisper again. Lower, hungrier. You opened it. Now let me out. I slammed my bedroom door, locked it, shoved my dresser in front of it, and collapsed to the floor, shaking uncontrollably. But as I sat there in the dark, tears stinging my eyes, I heard it again, this time from the other side of my bedroom wall. The scratching had moved. It wasn't in the hallway anymore. It was inside the apartment. The air in the hallway had thickened into something almost alive, clinging to my skin like a second suffocating layer. The scratching from the black door had grown into a maddening rhythm, a desperate clawing that seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. But now, there was something new, a sound woven into the scratching. Breathing. Wet, labored, guttural. I pressed myself against the wall, trying to listen, but every instinct screamed at me not to. The closer I leaned, the more I could hear something that sounded less like breathing and more like whispering. Voices, dozens of them. Some sobbing, some laughing, some pleading. They all overlapped like an orchestra of madness coming from behind the thin layer of wood. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, nearly making me jump out of my skin. The screen glowed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A voice, low, broken, terrified, spoke so fast I could barely keep up. Don't let it see you. Whatever you do, don't look if it opens. Don't make eye contact. Promise me. I froze. Who is this? There was silence, then a faint sound of someone weeping on the other end. A man, maybe. His words came out trembling. I lived in your apartment before you. I opened it. They never let me leave. The line went dead. The scratching stopped instantly, as though the caller's warning had silenced whatever was inside. The hallway seemed to expand with the sudden absence of sound, but instead of relief, dread filled the void. I backed away slowly, but as I turned, every light in the apartment flickered and died. I was left in complete darkness. My phone screen blinked out too, as if drained by an unseen hand. And then, the door handle turned. I didn't breathe. My eyes adjusted, catching the faint outline of the hallway from the dim glow of the streetlights leaking through the blinds. The black door swung open, not quickly, but painfully slow, as if savoring the act. A smell wafted out first, damp earth, rotting wood, and something sour, like old blood. I wanted to run, but my legs locked in place. Every muscle in my body seemed to understand what my mind didn't, that if I moved, it would know. From the darkness of the open door came shapes. Not one, not two, but many. Dozens of figures, pale and warped, crawling out on all fours. Their bodies were human in outline, but wrong. Their joints bent backwards, their skins sagged like wax melting off bone. And their faces, oh God, their faces were hollow, nothing but gaping voids where eyes and mouths should have been. The whispers filled the air again, not from mouths, but from those holes in their faces, a static chorus vibrating against my skull. I stumbled backward into the living room, my breath ragged, and they followed, not quickly, not hungrily, but inevitably, like they knew I couldn't stop them. One of them reached out with a trembling, skeletal hand. It brushed my arm. Cold, colder than anything I've ever felt, like plunging into ice water. My skin burned where it touched me, but when I tried to shove it away, my hand passed through its arm as if it wasn't entirely there. I screamed, and that was a mistake. Every hollow face snapped toward me at once, and though they had no eyes, no mouths, I felt them see me. The whispers became screams. I ran. I didn't even know where I was going. Through the kitchen, past the counter, into the bathroom. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. But then I remembered. The lock meant nothing. They could pass through. The mirror across from me fogged up with condensation, though the air was freezing. Slowly, letters began to scrawl across the glass, as if written by an invisible hand. You looked. My knees buckled. My chest tightened. I pressed myself into the corner, clutching my face as if shielding my eyes could undo what I had done. And then the bathroom light flickered once, twice, before going completely dark. The whispers were inside the room now. Something brushed against my cheek. The room swallowed me whole. For a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even understand what I was seeing. The walls were lined with mirrors, dozens of them, each reflecting a version of me that didn't feel like mine. Some were taller, some were thinner, some wore different clothes, but every reflection had one thing in common. Their eyes, black, bottomless, and gleaming like wet obsidian. I staggered forward, my hands shaking, the rope burns on my wrists raw and stinging. The air here was thick, heavy, like it had been sitting stagnant for centuries. My footsteps echoed as though the space stretched on forever, though the room itself looked no larger than a basement. And then I heard it again, the scratching. Not from the mirrors, but from behind them. A low whisper slithered through the air. You shouldn't have opened it. I spun, searching for the source, but every reflection mouthed the words in unison, their voices overlapping until it sounded like a chorus of the damned. My heart hammered in my chest. "Who are you?" I screamed, my voice cracking. The reflections began to move independently, not following me anymore. They smiled, wide, too wide, and pressed their hands against the glass. The sound of nails dragging down the surface made my spine lock up. One by one they started to push, the mirrors bowing as if the glass were no longer solid. And then one of them stepped through. It was me, but not me. His skin was pale, almost gray, his lips cracked and bleeding. His movements were stiff at first, like a puppet learning how to dance. But then he stood tall, and I realized he was stronger, more confident than I had ever looked. "You left me here," he said, his voice perfectly mine but dripping with venom. "You moved on. You forgot. But I didn't." "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, backing away. "Yes, you do," he snapped. "That black door has always been with you. You moved into a new apartment, but you didn't escape it. You never do. Every life you live, every time you try to outrun it, it follows. Because I follow." My stomach churned. His words rattled inside my skull. "No, this isn't real." He grinned, revealing teeth too sharp, too jagged. "Real? What's real is that I am the part you buried, the part you prayed would never surface again. But the scratching never stopped, did it? You always hear me at night." I shook my head, trembling. Memories began flickering. Moments I didn't recognize but felt as though I had lived them. A childhood bedroom with that same black door at the end of the hall. A college dorm room where I swore I heard whispers through the walls. An office cubicle where the door appeared in a place it shouldn't have existed. The black door had always been there, waiting, and I had always ignored it, until now. The doppelganger stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "It's not about the door, it's about you. You opened me, and now—" He leaned in, his breath rancid and warm against my ear. "You don't get to close me again." I ran. I didn't care where. I just needed out. My feet pounded against the cold concrete floor, but no matter how far I went, the mirrors never ended. The reflections laughed, whispered, scratched, until the sound was deafening. I pressed my hands to my ears, screaming for it to stop, and then I tripped. When I hit the ground, the mirrors shattered, collapsing in an explosion of glass. But instead of falling to the floor, the shards hung suspended in the air, floating, each one reflecting not me, but him, my other self. Dozens, hundreds of versions of him, all with black eyes and wicked smiles. The pieces of glass swirled around me like a storm. I tried to crawl away, but they cut into my arms, my legs, my face, tiny stings of fire. My blood spattered across the concrete, soaking into it like the floor was drinking it. "Don't fight it," my double whispered, stepping through the chaos without a single cut. "You and we're the same. You can't deny it anymore." I gasped for air, clutching my bleeding arms. "What? What do you want?" He crouched down in front of me, tilting his head with mock tenderness. "I don't want anything. I am you, and you are me. It's time we stop pretending we're separate." And then he pressed his hand to my chest. It felt like fire, like ice, like electricity all at once. My vision blurred, my body convulsed, and I screamed until my throat tore. Every reflection screamed with me. The sound was unbearable. I felt myself splitting, tearing in two, but then sinking, merging, becoming one. His black eyes opened inside my skull, replacing mine. His voice roared through my mind until it was my own. When the light finally dimmed, I stood. My body felt whole, stronger. My skin was pale, my veins dark. My lips curled into a smile that wasn't entirely mine. I glanced at the shattered mirrors and every reflection matched perfectly. Black-eyed, smiling, complete. I was him now. The scratching stopped. The black door was gone. And when I walked back into the hallway of my apartment, it looked exactly the same as before. Normal, silent, empty. No one would ever know what had happened. No one would ever hear the scratching again, because the thing inside wasn't locked away anymore. It was free, and it wore my face.